It's a beautiful March morning and we're here on the Hamble on a glorious day to test Bavaria's brand new C38. We've got 10 to 15 knots from the northeast, so we should have good conditions to push the boat a little bit and to see what she's made of. So when we went close hauled, hard on the wind, we got to about 30 degrees, 25-30 degrees off the apparent wind, which is more like 37-38 degrees to the true wind. So that's a reasonable pointing angle. She sits over onto her chines and then sits there quite happily, probably at about 20 degrees of heel, although we haven't got an inclinometer on board today. Even in quite blustery conditions, the helm has stayed light. She's got twin wheels but a single rudder, and actually I've been able to helm with one hand all the time. She's pretty responsive. She's not a race boat, but she is quite responsive, so it's been a really engaging sail. I've been able to sort of come up in the gusts a little bit, bear away in the lulls. I've really enjoyed sailing her. The cockpit layout's been well thought through. You've got two helm stations and they've been pushed as far aft as they can go. There's still space for a helm seat, and you've also got a nice wide helm seat outboard here. I'd like a little bit more space to come further outboard, but actually for cruising this is really comfortable. This boat's set up with the winches forward, so I can't reach the genoa sheet or the main sheet from the helm. Given how simple the rest of the boat is to sail, it would make sense to tick the box for the option of the winch here, so you can have the main sheet brought after the helm, and that would just give you a little bit more confidence that if your crew's busy, you could just spill some sail if you get hit by a gust. One other thing to note is just that there's quite a lot of rope around, and this boat hasn't been fitted with rope bags yet, but a nice little touch would have been some rope bins or something to put the genoa sheets into. That's only a minor gripe. I've got all the instruments aft here, so I've got autopilot, engine controls, chart plotter in the rear of the table, so that's all visible and where I'd want to see it. Also worth mentioning that there's sockets for a foot chock here, so that if you're helming from the high side you can put a chock in there, but they're removable so that you're not tripping over them when you're in harbour. You've got the backstays coming down here and the bimini. Obviously if you're tall the bimini's a little bit close to your head, but you don't have to have that on. And the backstay doesn't actually get in the way at all. When you're heeling over, it makes quite a nice little rest, so you can just snug in there and you feel quite secure. I haven't hit my head on it at all though, so yeah, happy with the layout. And then I've got the engine control throttle down there as well. All right, let's have a look around on deck and we'll start at the bow. Right at the front, you've got the optional bowsprit with the integral bow roller, and you can see that the attachment for the code 0 comes down to that, and there's a little bobstay underneath permanently mounted. I think particularly if you're getting the self-furling jib, you would definitely want the extra sail area of a code 0 for off the wind. You've got a furling genoa on this boat, and then we've got the electric windlass mounted sort of nicely flush into the cockpit, into the anchor locker here. One nice little touch, you've got this chain lock that's built into the rear end of the bow roller, which is really nice. That just locks the chain off when you anchor. Inside the locker, it's all teak deck as you can see. Planking goes right up to the edges rather than having a framing strip, but still it's very nice. And then in here you've got a cavernous bow locker. You can see that the chain is actually in a little sort of hanging locker there, which gives you loads of space underneath it. Other boats I've seen, the chain actually goes down below and then you have more space on top, which would seem a little bit more sensible because that's slightly hard to access under there. And you've also got the controller for the anchor windlass just tucked inside there, so you can control it when you're lowering the anchor. But otherwise that's all sensible and neatly done. You've got loads of space to work on this deck, thanks not least to this sort of really bluff bow. You can see that the bow's actually really rounded there, and you've got a moulded tow rail here. So that's part of the deck moulding just above the deck hull join. So that feels pretty nice and secure, and that actually all drains aft. The deck slopes slightly aft so that you don't get puddles of water in the scuppers. You've got 2 flush mounted hatches with drainage, so that's all nice, nothing to trip over there, and decent amounts of this diamond grip. Obviously maybe designed slightly more for the Med than the UK in March. You've got a nice sun pad, decent long sun pad. You can imagine if you're on a charter you might have family sprawled out on the deck. And then after that you've got the track for the self-tacking jib, which is nice. And to my mind, for a boat like this, the simpler it is to sail, the better. I think a self-tacking jib and a Code Zero is a really nice setup with enough sail power for downwind. Right, looking at the mast, this boat's got slab reefing, so you can see it here in this giant stack pack. Now I'm just over 6 foot tall, and actually I'm struggling to reach the sail there, so I would definitely opt for a couple of fold out footsteps there. That would be really good. You've got a really solid Selden boom, 9/10 Selden fractionally rigged mast with wire rigging. Chain plates are taken right to the right out to the full beam, so you've got really clear walk-throughs here. And then you've got a rod kicker, kicking strap here. Now I'd be tempted to add a little bit more purchase because of the main sheet arrangement, and I'll show you that just now. Now this really makes sense to keep the main sheet clear out of the cockpit. It means that there's no risk in a jibe, and the boom's really high, so it's clear of everybody's heads. The only problem is that you can see when you look at the whole length of the boom that the attachment point is only just aft of the kicking strap, which is just slightly forward of halfway forwards along the boom, which means that mechanically speaking you haven't got much purchase. We found on our test sail now in sort of 20 knots of wind, 18-20 knots of wind with a full mainsail up, we were actually struggling to get the boom onto the centre line. Now this can also be rigged as a 2 main sheet system, so you actually have 2 separate main sheets going to each side of the boat, so you can pull the boom to windward with one and pull it down with the other. I would definitely opt for that. It's a shame that there isn't an option to have a traveller further aft, but I think actually that the 2 main sheet system would work better. This 1 main sheet system was just a bit too hard work, particularly down to the, it's only a Lumar 40 winch, which felt a bit underpowered, or you could add more purchase in here. Part of the reason you need that purchase is the mainsail is an Elvstrom Epex mainsail, fully battened, reasonable amount of roach, so it's a really good big mainsail with loads of power, but we just didn't have quite enough leverage to make use of all of that power. Right, moving aft, we've got some gates in the guard wires here, which is really good. Top sides are reasonably high, but it's not too much of a step down. Depending on the condition of your knees, you might want a fender step there, but compared to some modern boats, it's not too much of a step, and it's easy enough to get aboard. And then you've got this lovely big spray hood, which means that the cockpit is very well sheltered. It comes to just forward of the cockpit seating, which means there isn't actually that much seating under the spray hood. You could have a spray hood that comes slightly further aft, I suppose, but it's really nice, gives you lots of shelter when you're underway. Clearly on a boat like this, a lot of it's about spending time on deck, relaxing at anchor, particularly somewhere sunny. So as you can see, we've got cushions everywhere, we've got plenty of space to sit around, and not least we've got this drop down transom. The hinges are sprung, so you just give it a little push, stops by itself there, and another little push, and it goes down by itself really gently. There's a stainless steel ladder that plugs into the holes there, and then you've got a proper bathing ladder, and then you've got this lovely big easy access to the water. A couple of interesting things to note. We've got twin wheels, but it's a single rudder, and to make space for the steering quadrant, rather than having that down low where it would interfere with the bunks in the two aft cabins, they've actually brought it up to deck level, which also means that access is really easy. So there you can see you've got the steering quadrant and the autopilot. It's not a weatherproof locker. It's got no seals around the edge, but it's well sheltered by the transom and by the lid. So that's well protected in there. That drops down. You've also got some locker space in here and access to the rear end of one of the main water tanks. Right, let's have a look around the rest of the cockpit. So we had a look at the helm stations while we were underway. Now you can see that we've got these quite nice cushions that go around the guard wires to give you a proper backrest. Chart plotter there, and then you've got this really solid table in the middle of the cockpit with really good storage in there, a couple of drinks holders and a decent handhold there. It would be quite nice to see a handhold just behind the wheel for people coming through this gap, but that's absolutely fine. Life raft stays in one of these two deck level cockpit lockers. It's got some other bits and bobs in there at the moment, a fender and your bathing ladder, but you would keep a valise life raft in there. So it goes back a reasonable way. It's not particularly deep, but you've also got the aft locker there. So you've got room for a reasonable amount of clobber, and your fenders can go into the cavernous locker at the bow, the anchor locker at the bow. So you don't need to, so it's really just lines and any other bits and bobs you need here. Scatter cushions, we'll come back to those later. And then here you've got all of the clutches and the halyards and the two winches. It's not a bad space to work in, the spray hood's high enough. These winches feel like they take the main sheet and the reefing lines and the kicking strap. Felt like they were a little bit underpowered. They're Lumar 40 self-tailing winches. I'd be tempted to go for something a little bit bigger, particularly if you've got to handle this powerful mainsail with them. The other issue is that at the moment that hasn't got rope stowage fitted, so just a rope bag either here or against the bulkhead, and that's coming. This boat's brand new this week, so that's going to be fitted. But when you're underway, there's lots of rope that needs to be stowed. Rather than washboards, we've got hinged doors, permanently mounted, which I think work really quite nicely. They clip on there. And then you'll notice that the companionway hatch is really long. It's made of perspex, so there's loads of light down below. But that length means that the companionway steps can be quite gradual and gives you a real sense of space as you walk down into the cabin below. Down below, you're struck by just how much space there is in this boat. You've got 4 meters of beam and everything's been pushed right out to use the maximum of that. Let's have a bit of a look around. On starboard, you've got the heads here, which is it's good to have that at the bottom of the companionway. And here you've got a sensible layout with a sink there and a separate shower stall. The toilet's actually in the shower stall, so that will get wet, but then it won't get the rest of the floor wet for people coming in and out after you. And then while you're underway, you're going to be moving forwards, so there's a really good big handhold here, and from here you can make it forwards to the mast support. It would be quite nice, when we were heeling earlier, I tried this out, it would be quite nice to have a handhold here or one up here, but actually that gets you around most of the cabin. And then coming forwards to the forward end of the port saloon bunk, you've got this chart table. It's nice to have a proper chart table. The chart table is small but functional. It's big enough for a leisure chart. Stowage inside is quite nice for books and pencils. And a clever little solution for stowing proper charts is you've got this section here against the bulkhead, so you can stow leisure folios down the back there vertically. So you have actually got space for quite decent chart stowage. And then you've got a chart plotter that connects to the chart plotter up on deck, VHF and another power socket, and your light there. You've got more stowage above you in these drop down lockers with a little catch at the top. And then just behind you here you've got your electrical switch panel, stereo and various circuit breakers. So that's all a sensible layout. Light switches are there, they're not going to get knocked, so they're in a good place. And then we'll have a look at the galley. Now I think for a 38-foot boat, well 37-foot hull really, this is a really good big galley. You've got a 3-burner stove, you've got a really big sink, it hasn't got a draining board, a separate sink. You might want 2 sinks there, but that's really good size. You've got this top opening pantry, that's just not a cool box or anything. And then if you come around this side, you've got a front opening fridge, full size front opening fridge with an ice box at the top. You've got stowage under the bunks, and then it's a reasonably shallow bilge. The floorboards are screwed down, sole boards are screwed down, and there's no finger holes on these panels to lift up, so we've got a little rubber sucker. And inside there you can see you've got these pretty meaty keel bolts and backing plate. In the saloon you've got this really nice social area. You can fit 4 or 5 people around the saloon table with it folded in half, or it doubles in size and you can seat 6 around it comfortably, but you could probably squeeze quite a few more in than that. You've got some stowage behind the seat backs. That's just held in place with Velcro there. It doesn't have a hatch cover there, but you've got quite a lot of room to stow things in there. Nice shelf area with this solid fiddle, which is good so things don't fall off down the seat backs. On this boat you've got air conditioning, which is an optional extra, it's not standard, so that takes up a bit of space in there, otherwise you'd have more stowage. And then again you've got these top opening lockers, still got some equipment in there, but that's quite nice and secure, just with a simple catch there. And you've got 3 of those along there, which gives you a good amount of stowage. Access to the Yanmar 40 horsepower engine is pretty good. You lift up the companionway steps, which are on a gas strut, and underneath here you can see it's all pretty well laid out. You've got your start battery at the front, access to filters. The water strainer has been mounted behind the engine, but I think it would be a bit more sensible to have that in front of the engine. And then the ducting at the back there, covered in silver foil, is the air conditioning again. And this engine bay actually has forced air ventilation, so you get a decent flow through of air, which is nice. Then you've also got these 2 side access panels, which are from the aft cabin. So that gives you loads of access space to get at all parts of the engine. The master cabin in the bow makes full use of the boat's beam that's been taken right the way forwards, and that bluff bow that you saw creates even more volume, which means that you've got space for a bed that's over 2 meters long and 1.70 meter wide. So it's a proper sort of, it's like king size bed, and then you've got hanging locker space on either side. There is an option in this boat to have a heads just behind me, so that the owner's cabin is an ensuite. Either way, you've got space to sit up in bed. You've got hull windows so that you can see out and enjoy the view. It's a really comfortable space in there. Coming aft in the boat, this boat's got 2 aft cabins. There is an option to have one of those as a utility space. Even so, with 2 aft cabins, they're identical, and you've got a 1.50 meter wide berth, 2 meters long again, so it's a really good sized double with locker space, hanging locker space. And throughout the boat you've got, including in the aft cabins, you've got 1.95 meter of headroom. So how much is this boat going to cost? Well, given how capable we found this boat to be, I think she's surprisingly affordable. The basic spec sail away price is £117,000 excluding VAT. Once you've ticked a few of the options and paid your tax, you're probably going to be looking at £200,000. On this boat, the price is more like £280,000 because they didn't spare the horses when it came to the options list. Here are just a few of the items that they ticked, and they ticked pretty much everything. Mainsail stack pack, Code Zero Angenica, bowsprit, teak decks, air conditioning, oak interior, lowering saloon table, bow thruster, and of course, half dozen cockpit scatter cushions, and I wouldn't skimp on those.